Brock Lesnar going for an F5 to Cena.
Brock Lesnar doesn't just beat opponents, he destroys them in quantities that shouldn't be physically possible, and these 5 moments prove he's the closest thing to an unstoppable final boss wrestling has ever created. There's beating someone in a wrestling match. There's dominating multiple opponents through superior skill and strategy. And then there's what Brock Lesnar does. Systematically dismantling 3, 4, sometimes 5 legitimate competitors simultaneously with such overwhelming physical dominance that it defies everything you think you understand about athletic competition. The Beast Incarnate operates on a different level than everyone else in professional wrestling, and throughout his legendary career, he's provided countless examples of why odds against Brock don't actually exist, because normal mathematical principles don't apply when one variable is a legitimately trained combat athlete who can German suplex giants like their children. These aren't feel-good underdog stories. These are horror shows where multiple professional athletes learned simultaneously that all their training, all their experience, all their combined effort meant nothing when facing someone who exists in a different physical category entirely. Let's examine 5 instances when Brock Lesnar proved that numbers are irrelevant when the Beast Incarnate decides it's feeding time. 1. Royal Rumble 2020. Brock Lesnar eliminates 13 competitors in under 5 minutes. The setup. Royal Rumble 2020 and WWE made the controversial decision to have Brock Lesnar enter at number 1 as WWE Champion, creating a scenario where he'd face the maximum number of opponents throughout the match. The decision generated immediate backlash. Fans worried Brock would dominate the entire Rumble, eliminating fan favorites and ruining the unpredictability that makes the match special. Those fears were completely justified. The carnage. Brock entered at number 1 and proceeded to execute what can only be described as systematic extermination of everyone who entered after him. Elias at number 2? German suplex, eliminated. Eric Rowan at number 3? German suplex, eliminated. Robert Roode, John Morrison, Kofi Kingston, Rey Mysterio, all legitimate talents, all thrown around like toys before being dumped over the top rope with the casual efficiency of someone taking out trash. The most devastating sequence came when multiple opponents tried coordinating attacks, working together to overwhelm Brock through numbers. Didn't matter. Brock German suplexed 3 people simultaneously, grabbed 2 opponents, executed the suplex on them, and caught a third midair who'd been attempting a flying attack. The visual of 3 professional wrestlers airborne at once, all victims of one man's power, created an image that perfectly encapsulated Brock's dominance. The numbers. 13 eliminations. Multiple superstars eliminated within seconds of entering. 5 minutes of absolute dominance that made the Royal Rumble feel less like competition and more like feeding time at the zoo. WWE had to eventually have Ricochet target Brock's injured leg to create vulnerability, because nothing else was working. When Brock's healthy and motivated, he's genuinely unstoppable regardless of how many opponents face him. Why it matters. This wasn't just Brock being booked strong. This was Brock demonstrating legitimate physical superiority over multiple trained athletes simultaneously. The German suplexes weren't carefully choreographed wrestling moves. They were displays of raw power that made you uncomfortable watching because it looked too easy, like a professional fighter sparring with amateurs just for the sadistic pleasure of dominance. 2. Raw 2012. Brock Lesnar returns and destroys John Cena plus everyone who tried helping him. The setup. April 2012. Raw after WrestleMania 28, and the wrestling world had no idea Brock Lesnar was returning to WWE after 8 years away. John Cena was in the ring celebrating his WrestleMania victory when Brock's music hit, announcing the return that would reshape WWE's main event scene for the next decade. But Brock didn't come back for a respectful acknowledgement or a handshake. He came back to hurt people. The carnage. Brock entered the ring with John Cena, circled him like a predator assessing prey, and then attacked with viciousness that immediately established this wasn't 2004 Brock, who still pretended to follow wrestling conventions. This was a legitimate UFC heavyweight champion who'd spent years fighting the toughest men on the planet and had returned to WWE with zero interest in playing by rules or respecting opponents. The F5 on Cena was just the beginning. When referees tried intervening, Brock threw them aside like annoying insects. When security rushed the ring, Brock destroyed them, four security guards simultaneously, all neutralized within seconds through combination of strikes and suplexes that looked legitimately dangerous. When more officials appeared, Brock targeted them too, creating a scene of absolute devastation where bodies were scattered around the ring and ringside area. The visual that defines this moment. Brock standing in the center of destroyed carnage, surrounded by over a dozen people he'd just incapacitated, John Cena bloodied and motionless, Brock's expression showing satisfaction, mixed with the promise that this was just a preview of destruction to come. Paul Heyman appeared to advocate for his beast, but even Heyman looked slightly uncomfortable with the level of violence Brock had just unleashed. The numbers. John Cena plus approximately 8 to 10 officials, referees, and security personnel, all destroyed in under 10 minutes. Some of those officials suffered legitimate injuries requiring medical attention, the realism of Brock's assault creating genuine concern rather than storyline drama. Why it matters. This was Brock's reintroduction to WWE, announcing that he'd evolved beyond wrestling into something more dangerous, more legitimate, more genuinely threatening than anyone else on the roster. The message was clear. Brock Lesnar doesn't care about your numbers, your backup, your attempts at organized resistance. He's a force of nature, and forces of nature don't negotiate or show mercy. 3. Summerslam 2017. Brock Lesnar survives fatal four-way by destroying Reigns, Strowman, and Samoa Joe. The setup. SummerSlam 2017 featured a fatal four-way for the Universal Championship. Brock Lesnar defending against Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, and Samoa Joe. On paper, this was designed to be Brock's nightmare. 3 legitimate physical threats, all capable of matching his power, all motivated to dethrone the Beast and claim the championship. The odds were stacked decisively against Brock retaining. Brock retained by destroying all 3 opponents so completely they looked like they'd been hit by trucks. The carnage. The match strategy was obvious. Reigns, Strowman, and Joe would need to work together to neutralize Brock, then fight each other for the championship. And initially, that strategy worked. They coordinated attacks, kept Brock down, prevented him from building momentum. For the first 10 minutes, Brock absorbed punishment that would have ended most matches, accumulating damage that suggested vulnerability. Then Brock got angry, and angry Brock is the most terrifying version of the Beast Incarnate. He German suplexed Roman Reigns. Then Samoa Joe. Then Braun Strowman, a 385-pound monster who Brock lifted and threw with the same ease he showed with smaller opponents. The crowd's reaction was pure shock because Braun doesn't get German suplexed. Braun's the one who typically overpowers everyone else. Watching Brock treat him like a regular opponent demonstrated physical superiority that defied logic. The finish saw Brock hitting F5s on all 3 opponents within 90 seconds. Roman, then Joe, then Strowman, each one absorbed into Brock's finishing sequence before any could recover from witnessing the previous victim's destruction. Brock covered Strowman for the pin, retained his championship, and stood tall, having proven that 3 legitimate monsters working together still couldn't overcome one Beast Incarnate operating at full capacity. The numbers. 3 absolute physical specimens. Roman Reigns, who main event multiple WrestleManias, Braun Strowman, who'd been destroying everyone on Raw, Samoa Joe, who brought legitimate combat sports background. All neutralized by one man who demonstrated that genetic freak status plus MMA training equals dominance that numbers can't overcome. Why it matters. This wasn't Brock benefiting from lucky circumstances or opponents making mistakes. This was Brock absorbing everything 3 elite athletes could deliver and responding with superior violence that made their combined effort irrelevant. When people claim Brock's unstoppable, this match is Exhibit A. If those 3 working together couldn't beat him, who possibly could? 4. Extreme Rules 2012. Brock Lesnar versus John Cena plus everyone who interfered. The setup. Extreme Rules 2012, Brock's first real match after returning to WWE, facing John Cena in an Extreme Rules match where anything goes. The build had been intensely personal. Brock had injured Cena on Raw, had shown complete disregard for WWE's rules and structure, had positioned himself as someone who didn't care about entertainment or sports entertainment, only about inflicting pain. The match exceeded even the elevated expectations, becoming one of the most violent encounters WWE had broadcast in years. The Carnage, for 30 minutes, Brock and Cena waged war using every weapon available: steel steps, ring posts, the announce table that Brock demolished with Cena's body. But the moments that define this match came when other people tried involving themselves, attempting to help Cena or stop Brock's assault. Multiple referees tried calling the match when Cena appeared legitimately injured. Brock attacked them, creating genuine fear that he'd crossed from performance into assault. Medical personnel entered to check on Cena. Brock threw them out of the ring, one medic taking a particularly nasty fall that looked completely unplanned. Security rushed to restore order. Brock neutralized 4 security guards with strikes and suplexes that generated genuine concern from commentary about whether people were getting legitimately hurt. The visual of Brock standing over Cena's bloodied body while surrounded by over a dozen people he'd just incapacitated, referees, medics, security, officials all scattered like war casualties, created imagery that transcended wrestling and entered genuine disturbing territory. Even though Cena eventually won the match through chain-assisted attitude adjustment, the overwhelming impression was that Brock had destroyed everyone who entered his path and only lost through superhuman Cena resilience plus weapon assistance. The numbers: John Cena plus approximately 10 to 12 officials, medics, and security personnel, all neutralized during a 30-minute war that felt less like wrestling match and more like legitimate combat with casualties. Why it matters. This match established Brock's current WWE persona, someone who exists outside normal wrestling rules, who views everyone from main eventers to officials as equally disposable obstacles, who can and will destroy anyone regardless of their role or purpose. The collateral damage wasn't incidental, it was the point, demonstrating that when Brock's unleashed, everyone's in danger regardless of whether they're actually competing. 5. Royal Rumble 2003. Brock Lesnar dominates despite not even being in the Rumble match. The setup: Royal Rumble 2003, and Brock Lesnar was WWE Champion defending against Big Show in a separate match earlier in the evening. The Royal Rumble match itself didn't involve Brock. He'd already competed, already retained his championship, and should have been finished for the night. But Brock wanted to make a statement, wanted to remind everyone that being WWE Champion meant being the most dominant force in the company. So he inserted himself into the Royal Rumble match without being entered and destroyed multiple competitors just to prove he could. The Carnage. During the Royal Rumble match, while legitimate entrants were competing for WrestleMania opportunity, Brock Lesnar's music hit despite him not being one of the announced 30 competitors. He walked down the ramp with purpose, entered the ring, and proceeded to eliminate multiple superstars: Matt Hardy, Shannon Moore, and several others who were confused about why the WWE Champion who'd already had his match was now destroying them in a competition he wasn't part of. The most memorable sequence saw Brock lifting 2 opponents simultaneously, grabbed one in each arm, and throwing them both over the top rope together, eliminating them as a matched pair with the casual efficiency of someone disposing of trash. The remaining competitors in the ring backed away, recognizing that engaging Brock was suicide and hoping he'd leave on his own after making his point. Brock eventually exited the ring voluntarily, having eliminated 5 or 6 legitimate Rumble entrants just to prove that even when he's not in a match, he's still the most dominant force in WWE and can destroy anyone whenever he chooses. The statement was clear. Brock Lesnar doesn't need to be entered in competitions to dominate them, doesn't need official participation to prove superiority. The numbers: 5 to 6 legitimate Royal Rumble competitors eliminated by someone who wasn't even in the match. The audacity of appearing in a competition you're not entered in and still dominating demonstrates confidence and physical ability that borders on superhuman. Why it matters. This exemplifies Brock's entire career philosophy. Rules don't apply to him, normal competitive structures don't constrain him, and he can insert himself into any situation and immediately become its most dominant force through pure physical superiority. When people ask why Brock's booked so strongly, why he's protected so carefully, why WWE treats him as special compared to everyone else, this is why. Because when he wants to, Brock can actually dominate multiple elite athletes simultaneously, and the performance isn't wrestling work. It's legitimate physical superiority being displayed through wrestling framework. The pattern that defines Beast Incarnate's legacy. Examining these 5 instances reveals consistent patterns in how Brock Lesnar dominates multiple opponents. Physical superiority. Brock doesn't win through psychology or strategy. He wins through being legitimately stronger, faster, and more athletically gifted than combinations of opponents who should theoretically overwhelm him through numbers. Legitimate background. Brock's NCAA Division I Wrestling Championship and UFC Heavyweight Championship aren't just resume padding. They're evidence of legitimate combat sports excellence that translates directly to professional wrestling dominance. When Brock suplexes 3 people simultaneously, it's not just impressive choreography, it's actual physical feat that most performers couldn't execute. Fearlessness about booking. WWE protects Brock's aura carefully. But these moments show Brock himself is willing to be booked in scenarios where he faces overwhelming odds specifically because he's confident in his ability to make those scenarios look believable through his performance. Lesser performers would be exposed trying to credibly defeat 4 opponents simultaneously. Brock makes it look easy. Escalation philosophy. Each time Brock destroys multiple opponents, the next instance has to be even more impressive to maintain his aura. Royal Rumble 2020's 13 eliminations happened because prior multi-man dominance displays had established the baseline that Brock routinely destroys 3 to 5 people. So, WWE needed to double that number to create genuine surprise. Collateral damage. Brock's dominance isn't limited to actual competitors. He destroys officials, security, anyone who enters his space when he's in beast mode. This creates atmosphere of genuine danger that transcends normal wrestling where non-competitors are protected, making Brock feel more legitimate and threatening. Why Brock's multi-man dominance matters for wrestling. Brock Lesnar's ability to credibly dominate multiple opponents simultaneously serves crucial function in WWE's ecosystem. He's the final boss, the ultimate measuring stick, the standard against which all other dominance is measured. When someone eventually defeats Brock cleanly, that victory carries weight precisely because of moments like these 5 instances where Brock demonstrated that normal competitive advantages don't apply to him. The controversy around Brock's booking, criticisms that he's pushed too hard, protected too carefully, wins too often, exists specifically because WWE has successfully created someone who feels genuinely unbeatable. And while that creates frustration for fans who want more variety in main event outcomes, it also creates the foundation for genuine underdog stories when someone finally does overcome the Beast Incarnate. These 5 instances aren't just impressive spots or cool moments. They're building blocks of mythology that elevate Brock Lesnar from great wrestler to legitimate attraction, someone whose very presence changes the dynamics of any match or situation he enters. When 30 people enter the Royal Rumble and Brock's among them, everyone understands that Brock eliminating 10 people single-handedly isn't just possible. It's expected, because he's demonstrated that capability repeatedly throughout his career. The Beast Incarnate doesn't just beat opponents. He doesn't just win matches. He systematically dismantles multiple elite athletes simultaneously with such overwhelming physical dominance that it redefines what we think is possible in professional wrestling. And these 5 moments prove that when Brock Lesnar decides it's time to destroy everyone in his path, numbers become irrelevant and overwhelming odds become just another day at the office for the most dominant force WWE has ever created.